job to manage relationships with vendors, independent software vendors. Primarily, it's my job to recruit consultants who become part of our channel, and channel development. And this presentation is based on that job, the conversations I have with consultants, and I would put it out simply this way. How many people here think that OS2 is a good business solution, a reliable way to run business applications? How many of you want to sell OS2 to businesses? I'm astounded. Almost no one I know wants to sell OS2 to anyone because it takes too long. You have the same discussions all the time. You know, selling OS2 these days is a tough sled to pull. And one of the things that we're looking at, and our business model goes back about 18 months, maybe longer than that. Managing desktops, in fact, the whole outsourcing of service and support is the trend of the industry. I work for IBM. IBM is a big software and hardware computer vendor, a big support organization. The users are supported by a company called Task Force. They're not supported by IBM. The whole computing environment is outsourced. So how do you outsource the desktop? Intel has something called LANDESK, there's Novell. All these things are devoted to managing business desktop computing in large accounts. But essentially everybody needs that kind of desktop computing management. We're very interested in managing the enterprise because that's where a lot of money is. But the reality is most consultants, whatever they say, like 80% of the market is mining that 20% of the revenue that comes from the real world, the small to medium-sized business, and that's where we're going to focus. I'll only mention the enterprise now and again to say that there's difference. Okay. So what we're really talking about is you have your OS2 skills, you know it's a good product, can you still make a good living using those skills, can you still get a return on investment? Yes, but it's very difficult to do if what you're going to go out there to do is try and sell OS2 running on hardware, sell OS2 applications. You can only, I believe, sell that to people who are already believers. Okay. On the other hand, can you go to an organization and say, I just had this conversation with a user in the exhibit area. You have a limited amount of resource in your organization, a limited amount of money, a limited amount of people, a limited amount of time. You can devote those resources to servicing customers, which drives revenue, or you can manage your computers, which tends not, it supports your business, but it tends not to drive revenue. Because are you telling me, I mean, I sit around and I think about how much time I spend helping my users and how much money I could make from that time. And it's stupid. But the SaaS client model creates a situation, and I can only think of computers in this light. Here's the technology that is outside their core services, but they manage it themselves. What other technology does any business manage themselves that's outside their core services? I can't think of one. I'm moving to hear before. But the example I use to illustrate this point, typically, and by the way, this discussion, and I want to keep it in a discussion format, but I have a white paper on our website, 2 channel partners. This is not on the public side of the website. Anyone who wants access to the channel partner side of the site, send me an email. I'll give you a log on the document there. This document will also be on the Warpstock CD. There's nothing terribly sensitive about it. If you go to our website, you will not see a bunch of things about Warpstock, Vortex, West, and OS2. That's not. I'm an advocate of OS2 as a business solution. I'm not an advocate. I'm not looking to wave that flag.
Yeah, I want to know how it's about the big Susan Jeopardy?
you say the password, you get access to the fact that that's tool we're talking about. Why is it particularly attractive to use the services model if you're a consultant?
You couldn't hear the audience.
We don't have a mic for the audience.
Revenue stream, precisely. I mean, here you're talking about...
We're doing our best, and I like the feedback.
And set up a services contract for 24 months that pays you every month, as opposed to going and building a network for them, which is a lot of work over a period of months. And by the way, how are you doing in lining up your following jobs after that, while you're working 16 hours a day at that site? And then when you finally finish the job, and you don't get the checks yet, because something doesn't quite work the way they thought it was going to work, and you don't have any jobs lined up to take that place. And it's not a free situation, it's a peak and valley situation most of the time for most of us. On the other hand, you can do the same work, set up a network, and charge something, either a monthly contract for an organization, or per seat, or per application, or anything that fits your business model. And we'll talk about specifically how to price and how to get paid, but what you're looking for is a recurring revenue stream. Now, what you want to do to manage a business desktop environment is to have a client that doesn't go down. More to the point, you want a server that doesn't go down. And we took a long, hard look at how you're going to set up this kind of network. Warp server is an urban legend from a reliability standpoint. And you know, there are people like Randall Flint around here, and you can get your own testimony if you don't have an opinion yet. But I'm a particular advocate of running IBM Infinity servers with IBM Warp server, either SMT or Warp server for e-business. E-business hasn't been around long enough to establish the track record that the SMT kernel does. But they're remarkable. You put that server in, you lock it up in a room, turn off the lights, don't tell anybody where it is, and it will run forever. And I mean, Workspace on Demand boot camp, they had some folks there from an aerospace company in Washington. They were telling a little story about when you open the doors, you have to initial the date, you know, put down the date, put your initial date to open the door. They had this door that hadn't been opened in 3 years. Nobody could remember what was behind the door. They unlocked the door to see what was there. There was a LAN server running for 3 years straight on their network. That's the kind of reliability that we're talking about. If you want to be in managing the desktop, you want an on-site server that's not going down. To my mind, that's Warp server. A lot of you are talented enough to manage your own servers. That's fine. I'm not here to sell hardware, but I do like the Infinity service. I think it's beautiful. You want a client that doesn't go down. We'll talk a little bit about clients later too, but for a couple of reasons, we recommend, this will work with any kind of a PC, but we recommend something like the Next Station, which is no drive, no diskette drive. I'm getting a real clue as to why we call Eskimos, you know, call it refrigerated system. By the way, why do you call refrigerated Eskimos?
Keep your food from freezing.
Yeah, if they don't have a refrigerator, the food freezes, and you can't eat it. So you sell a refrigerator, they need refrigerators, okay. For some reason that was on my mind when I submitted the topic of Warpstock, but I can't remember what I was, I really should have said, how do you make money with OS2? Then we would have sold it for them. The thing of it is, you want a client that's not going to go down, you have a net station, or you have a computer that has no CD-ROM, it has no diskette drive, it has no hard drive, it has no moving parts. What's going to bring that puppy down? You've already designed almost 80% of the typical user failures out of the network. And the resolution of 95% of the remaining problems is the same. You have the server reload the desktop for the user. I mean, it's a 7x24 environment that is essentially extremely easy to manage and support because of the way it's been designed. I describe most business users
Yeah.
And let's face it, you're not talking hobbyists, you're not talking home users. You're talking about people who come into work, turn on their own seats,
hang around for the security
they
show
tend to
because
be what I describe as application literate. They know how to get their jobs done. They are not PC literate. They do not know how to
You can
resolve
send
the
them a
problem.
message now, though, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really like is the description of what's known as peer support services.
Just tell
This is kind of like when I was at IBM, we had something called temporary random access filing system. Those were the piles of papers on people's desks. Those were temporary random access filing system. Peer support services begins with, hey, you ever see this happen? Did this ever happen to you? And the next thing you know, you got 4 people standing around a cubicle saying, yeah, I think I saw that happen once, you know. In the meantime, service has been called, and somebody has to trot down. And usually, from an organization standpoint, an expensive technician has to come down to visit this PC and tell everybody, all right, move along, folks, there's nothing to see here. And are they going to be able to fix that PC for that user who is now deprived of that business tool for the time being? Maybe, maybe not, depends on what's broke. But, you know, when that PC fails, that person is out of business, and all of us have been there. What we're talking about here is a server-managed client that is a business tool. We're talking about nothing more than the ability to access applications and data. We're talking about reliable, accessible, 24/7 access to information, period. This is not for people, this is not to say that this is the kind of environment that somebody wants to compile programs on. This is not for power users. This is essentially simply a business tool. And that's what you're going in to say, all right, let's talk about your desktop. Let's talk about how we can set up your business desktop and how I can supply it to you, make it a more reliable environment, make it a more available environment that will cost you a lot less money, and you can take those resources back from managing IT and start managing services, and start servicing customers and driving revenue. And I said I was going to give an example, and I got off that topic. What I was going to say is that the best example I've heard is the example of a catering organization that basically has to deliver goods to restaurants, to event facilities, to stores. So they develop, they bake, whatever they're going to do to get the food ready. They have trucks, they have fleet of trucks, they hire drivers, they plan routes, they load trucks, they unload trucks, they schedule things. But do they own the trucks? Probably not. They don't care that they own the trucks or not. Do they maintain the trucks? Are there oil mechanics on the customer payroll? Probably not. They probably have a service contract with a garage down there, and the trucks are brought in for regular maintenance, and they have their maintenance records. They probably have a roadside service agreement, so when something breaks down, they send a page and somebody comes and picks it up. In other words, PCs should be no different. Why do people manage their own PCs? And I'll make that a legitimate question. Why do businesses maintain PCs? They have no choice, because so much of the support happens to be delivered exactly where the user was. You know, and what we're talking about that's really different here is the ability, and there's no miracle technology here, but the ability to set up a network and put an application on your workstation that lets you manage that network. And when something goes wrong, they call you or send a page. You take your management application, you dial into their server, and you fix the problem. Or more to the point, and perhaps more elegantly, you get a new release of an application, a fix or whatever. You dial in from your workstation onto their server, drop it onto their server, open the user's file, drag and drop it onto the user's file. They, online, get an icon on their desk, there's the application. And no one has to go near that site. And why is that important? It's important because the key to this whole thing is controlling costs. You're going to make an agreement as to how much the services contract is going to cost the user, the money you don't spend is the money that you make. Now, why this doesn't work so well on Windows is because every time a consultant has to make an unexpected stop to a customer site to put out a fire, they lost the revenue that that time could have brought them on another job, and they've absorbed an expense of going to see that user. And if you can't control your costs, you can't control your net revenue. You can have fine gross revenue, but if you don't have good net revenue, there's no point. So what we're really saying here is you want to set up a network that runs all the time. You select applications like Sundial's RelishNet, PM Mail, things that simply don't break Husband Brothers Mail Service. All people that are here, well, not PM Mail, but you've got basically an environment that once the thing is installed, I expect your pager to go off by people asking questions. But since business users are application literate, once they learn how to do that job, your pagers are not doing, your pager's not going to go off. And you basically get to sit back and do other services work, maybe write applications for them and so on. But you continue to get that revenue stream from your service agreement. And this is not something that you can do on Windows. This is something I think that you could do on Linux someday, but it's not there today. OS2 is the right platform for this environment today. And I've written a lot of stuff on some of the online publications about why I feel that way, and I'll let it go with this. So far, I have seen no questions, no contradictions, no comments. Feel free at any time to jump in and say, Bob, you marketing weasel. What up? I'm ready. It's what I do. How do you price this thing? Why don't I tell you? It's very hard to tell you how to price it, but I will give you some simple guidelines. You're going out there, and by the way, if an organization has 120 workstations, you don't have to put 120 workstations on a contract. You can pick the ones that fit the model, and not everything is going to fit the model. For those that don't fit the model, you have all your current contracts and services to deal with, okay? But you're talking about something that is, you're going to supply all the software, all the hardware, all the service and support. That is the equivalent of total cost of ownership. So what is the total cost of ownership? How many of you know accounts that understand total cost of ownership? Or could tell you? And by the way, in a sales call, that's very important. What is your total cost of ownership? Gee, I don't know. Write that down because you're going to tell them that a couple of times later. Well, how can you say that? So you already told me you don't know. So let's just go a little light on that. Okay. Ask them, for example, how much does it cost to rent or to lease a business desktop computer? Probably around $100 a month. You can go to Dell's website, they have a little calculator there, configure a business desktop, put in the lease figures, it'll come back, it's going to be about $100 a month. What is the total cost of ownership? Everybody remembers the Gartner groups, and by the way, on our website you will find a whole document on total cost of ownership. You can go to Yahoo or Alta Vista, put in total cost of ownership, do your own research. I think that's helpful in a sales call. The famous Gartner Group study says that it costs $9,500 a year to support a Windows 95 user. I don't know any business that will agree to that figure, but it certainly unnerves them. We couldn't possibly be spending that much. How can you say that? You already told me you don't know. But you don't make that kind of an issue. They say you both short imagine $800 a month. Can you imagine people really spending that? But Gartner has done an excellent job. Gartner is, of course, the Bible of the industry, and if they say people are spending $800 a month, who am I to argue? But there's also DataQuest and there's IDC. So now that you have scared your prospect by telling them that they're spending $800 a month, you can drop down a little bit and say, well, IDC over here says $5,000 a year. That's still pretty high. And DataQuest and IDC also have this $3,000. Well, by now, I think if you come down to $3,000 after really frightening them with $9,500, making them feel a little better with $5,000, they might just buy off on $3,000 a year. The reality is the total cost of ownership of the $3,000 a year figure is based on fixed function terminal users. And those are reservation clerks, bank tellers, and so on. They're rather disciplined environments and easy to support. The toughest person to support is the general business office suite user. That's the most expensive person to support, and it's probably the one that you're going to encounter the most often. But frankly, I think you just want to get in. You want to have a discussion that says, okay, let's work on something quickly that we can agree to. And somewhere around $280 to $300 a month is not only a reasonable total cost of ownership, it's low. And you're going to have to do the homework on the internet or whatever trade journals you want to be able to sell that. I'm not going to do that here, but that's the spot that you're looking at. But would you feel good if you could sit down there and say, all right, now you agree to $300 a month is probably a reasonable TCO. It costs you $100 a month to lease a PC. Let's split the difference and say $200 a month per seat. Does that sound good to you? Well, it's a starting point. It's actually a discussion I successfully had before, but you can go down to 180, 175. I will give you an example, from a water district that contacted us about 52 workstations. They wanted to do NT, they wanted to do Microsoft Office. They had a 3-year budget of $350,000 for these 2 NT servers, 52 NC workstations, and so on. We thought about it, we ballparked $1,000 a client, that's $52,000. 2 Infinity servers, maybe another 10,000, maybe 15,000. Office Suite, Star Office, nothing. Smart Suite, it wouldn't cost very much. Let's say $75,000 to put in that network as opposed to the empty network of $350,000. What figure do we want to use to capture their attention? Okay, we will price it at $250,000 versus the Microsoft proposal for $350,000. That's $135 per month per seat. There's a figure for you. Can you live with that? That's only $35 more than it costs you to lease the equipment. But it still means that the service partner who gets that business is looking at $175,000 net revenue opportunity over 3 years for not a lot of work. By not a lot of work, what I mean is that person is not going to be there every day providing on-site service. They're going to be doing other jobs. They're going to be writing applications. You may not even be calling on that account. If you can set up a couple of accounts like that, you can start to administer these networks from your yacht. All right, health card. I don't care. But the point is, you can do this, you can save the customer money, you can provide them with a more reliable environment, and the net revenue opportunity is there. Can you do it on Windows? Yes. You only have to charge them about 3 times as much. Because now, I'm sorry, there's no easy way around this. You can either do Windows-based terminals, which I think is a really remarkable, technically elegant solution. God knows it's a price performer. Or you can start looking at what version of Windows you want to get on now, so you can move to Windows 2000 and Office 2000. That ought to be a big money saver. I don't know, has anybody read my article in Third Tutors Online about, okay. I've sort of calculated that if they get 20 million business users to migrate to Windows 2000, that's probably $100 billion worldwide without any return on investment available. Now, I also said, and I'll take precedence on this too, that the federal savings and loan bailout was about $30 billion. When Germany reunited with East Germany, that was supposed to be around 40 to 50 billion. I figured if you're going to spend $100 billion, you want to get a couple of banking systems and countries out of the deal. But according to Gartner Group, In order to get a return on investment, you have to stay on the platform for 36 months. How many people expect to stay on a Windows platform for 12 months, 18 months, 36 months? Yes, Chris. Hold on, just one second. Hey, John, is the microphone on the floor open?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Chris, why don't you use the microphone on the floor so we can all hear you?
I'm working on it.
Keep going. No, John, just Chris, let John keep talking to him.
I did some calculations on what it would cost to support a Windows client on using a model similar to the Wise Manager setup in Serenity, but using Workspace on demand for Windows. That gives you the ability to remotely administer the client. And just for doing a setup like Windows 98 and Microsoft Office and nothing else, the lowest price I can get it down to is minimum of $350 a month per workstation.
I think that, when you say $200 a month to a small business, that's far. 5 workstations, that's far. That's usually a pure network, but it's not unreasonable. And you don't have to have, you price your own services. When you get up to around 30 workstations, I certainly think you need to be pricing around $180 a month. And you would still be handling the Windows workstation model. But a lot of people, for example, I mentioned the peer support services. That's not I don't know anybody who doesn't start to say, well, how many of you have been through this? Have you ever seen this happen before? A couple of people starting to stand around. You've never seen that happen in an office? How much do you think that adds to total cost of ownership? To have about 5 people staring at the blue screen of death. How many people calculate that into TCO? Nobody that I know of. I'll give you another quick calculation for TCO. The industry standard is that the cost of acquisition is 20% of total cost of ownership over 3 years. So how much does it cost to outfit a business PC? $2,000, $2,400, those are industry figures. So if you take that as a 20% cost, and over 3 years, you're probably talking around $10,000 total cost of ownership. Divide that $10,000 by 36 months, and you're back around $300. If you can't convince a business that they're spending about $300 per month per user for software, hardware, services, support, you're not trying hard because it is a low figure. So how do you price your service? I think you price your service anywhere from $135 to $180 to $200 a month, depending on the environment, depending on the requirements, depending on what kind of person you are, what your costs are. It's a business. And that's it. Any questions or comments? Yeah.
But Bob, it's not all gravy. I mean, somebody has to do backups. Somebody has to unjam printers. Somebody has to look for the broken cable. There are things that require physically being on site. How do you anticipate supporting that?
I think that's reasonable. I think that even a client is going to break. A server could go down. It's not a perfect world. I'm counting on technical professionals. If you're going to design a network and you don't want to go back there, do your job. Use RAID, use mirroring. Do you want to have failover support? You can build that into it. The hardware and software, as far as clearing a paper jam, you don't call a consultant to clear a paper jam. You're right, I don't have a lot of respect for users. That's why I don't sell to users. That's why I sell to technical professionals, because I don't particularly like users or dealing. I also don't like dealing with salespeople, even though I am one. They're such liars. When I was working for IBM as a lowly systems engineer, we once defined end users as a person who thinks they wanted everything they ever heard of. You know, they see somebody who's got a little program that draws a line, I gotta have that. You know, support those people. Yeah, you know, I'm glad you bring up the point because it is important. What you're really talking about is network design. For the sake of time, I'm simplifying. But I want to talk to a system integrator who knows how to design a network. And you're designing, anytime you design a network, you design for certain objectives. What you're designing in this case is for reliability and availability. If you don't take that into account, then you're going to lose money because you're going to have to go back to it. We also talked, for example, about leaving a couple of client machines on site. Let's say you use the IBM NetStation 2800s. You leave a couple of those on site that might cost you $800 a pop. But when a machine fails, and you're using Wise Manager, you go to the closet, you pull out another client, you cable it in. It reports its NIC address to Wise Manager. You key in the new NIC address, that station boots again, they're back in business. They take the one that failed, put it in a box, send it back to IBM. IBM fixes it or replaces it. That's part of the 3-year warranty on that station. Now, does it cost, you really want to pay $800 for that station? No. Is it worth it? The first time one fails, it probably is. But, you know, that's a design element. Yes, ma'am?
Can you address a little bit about how you would convince people to not use Microsoft Office then? And how a lot of their proprietary software, I mean, if I'm talking to the dairy, I'm talking to people that have their own proprietary software where it's currently running on it.
Clearly, if you're talking about a business solution, in which we are, applications are what drives it. If they insist on running Microsoft Office, I'll give you whatever points you want, but if they insist on running Microsoft Office, you're going to run Windows. And once you start to use one piece of Microsoft code, it's in for penny, in for pound. And it's a slippery slope. You just have to say, by the way, yeah, I can do this on Windows. I can use Workspace on Demand with the Windows client. As Chris pointed out, it will roughly triple the expense. Is that worth it to you? By the way, when you're done, you will have all the reliability and availability and performance of a Windows client because it's a Windows client. In fact, maybe you should just leave it at Windows clients and run a Warp server and give them the traditional services contract. But then you have to ask the question, do you want to use Word or do you want to do text processing? Do you want to use Excel or do you want to use a spreadsheet? Do you want to use Word or do you want the ability to exchange documents with Word? Do you want to spend $400 for an office suite per seat when you got 100 seats, or do you want to pay $0 for Star Office? I mean, I'm not going to say that Star Office is everything that Microsoft Office is, but for 85% of the users, it's enough. And goodness knows it's a good price performance. If you've been into the exhibit area, you've seen the new 1.5 beta for Smart Suite that Lotus is demonstrating in there. It's good. I'm not convinced that it's a network client Office suite yet, but since they plan to run it on Workspace on Demand, if they've done their homework, it is. It might not be as inexpensive as Star Office, but it has all the file filters. It has hooks in it that allow it, if you're a Windows user, you can pull down menus that will correspond to the Microsoft Office task, the Smart Suite task. It has Lotus IBM badge, which does have some value in organizations. I mean, you don't have to say, well, Star Office, yeah, well, that's Star Division. They started in Germany. They're recently acquired by Sun. Everybody knows who Lotus is pretty much in the software business. So, and that has some value. But the answer is, if they have an application that requires Windows, then you're not going to be able to use this model. If what they want to do is to run their business desktop, you have a chance of selling this model. This model means that you have an appliance, a business appliance, which happens to be a PC. And in that is an embedded proprietary Intel operating system developed by IBM. That's how I avoid saying all that. I've actually had a consultant sell a system to a company using those terms. It was honest, good market, legal, tax law. But as I was saying to Roger before, in data processing 101, you were taught that the operating system is the traffic cop that moves data from here to there. That's the role of an operating system. One of the biggest problems with taking things further than that is you now have an organization, when you go to sell them an application, they say, does it run on Windows? You say, why? Well, we can only use it if it runs on Windows. That's a pity. Why is that? Well, we only have Windows skills. Well, do you realize that if you outsourced all this stuff to me, you could use any application that you wanted to, and skills, your in-house skills would not be an issue. Because it's my skills, it's the skills that I bring into the equation. Can you still use Windows clients under an outsourced contract? Of course. You simply can't use my managed client today. You know, we're hoping to be able to run Win32 applications at some point down the road, but that's a vaporware, not something that I really want to, push today. But even if we could do that, it's going to add a couple layers of expense, and it's not something that I would recommend to a user. Yeah.
How would you consider offering like tutorial services for let's say you change over a company to use cloud? There's that learning curve for them to learn new functionality in cloud. Would you consider putting like let's say having employees take some tutorial classes with you?
Absolutely. You put them under a services contract. It doesn't mean that you can't charge them for training.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm trying to look how you approach that.
I would approach it by telling them, do you think that you're not going to have to retrain employees when Microsoft upgrades their applications? Are you going to tell me that you're not going to see a new version of Windows that's not going to require retraining, or Office that's not going to require retraining? You know, that the fact that you're turning over applications is not, it's so consistent with the Windows model, which is basically an upgrade and churn model anyway, that the fact that you're changing applications is very consistent with the Microsoft Windows business model. There's one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and it's an important thing too, is the difference between a capital acquisition and an operational expense. Which do most businesses prefer? An operational expense which is written off at day one, as opposed to a capital acquisition which is carried on the books as an asset and depreciated over time, usually much longer than the value of the item, which might be a PC or a piece of software. And IBM, and I just said I spent a lot of time with IBM. IBM was famous for being willing to spend much more money to rent something than it would have cost them to buy it. But it was cheaper for them to rent it and write it off as an operational expense than it was for them to buy it and carry it as an asset. And that same sales pitch, I mean, go talk to an accountant, have them help you with your pattern, but it's an important another thing about an acquisition is how many of you like to buy something for a business. I don't. I don't like to buy the little shopping bags that we handed out. I don't like the whole buy decision. The act of acquiring is not a pleasant one for many of us. Somehow the idea of signing a service agreement seems so much more benign than the act of acquiring a bunch of PCs and software that I might have to live with for how long. Now, I realize it's psychological and perhaps an indication of how emotionally malformed I am, but the simple fact is that a buy decision is more unpleasant for most people than the act of signing a services contract. Here's another thing about a services contract. Who signs it? Typically the user organization. Those of us who have sold to municipalities or education or whatever, how often have you sold something, or even larger accounts? You sell something to the user organization, they submit the paperwork, it goes up up the purchasing and someone else gets the business. An operational expense is typically signed off at a lower level than a capital acquisition. So if you're selling something, then you pretty well can account that it's going to go into a purchasing process, which is at the very least going to make it longer, and perhaps mean that the user no longer controls the process, as opposed to signing a service agreement, which is usually kept at a lower level. Once you sold it to the user, you're finished. How come nobody wants to get up and really say, Bob? So often they do. Bob. Bob.
I have a question. How do you deal with the large shops that have in-house IT people who may have a vested interest in the old system? I can understand the small office networks with maybe 10, 20 workstations. But what about the big shops? Aren't you going to run into a lot of resistance from those folks, and how do you handle it?
Okay. One of the reasons I'm not focused on the large accounts today is because they have long sell cycles. It takes a long time to develop a revenue stream, but certainly it's attractive. Wise Manager Enterprise supports how many workstations? You probably don't know. 64,000. And that's where we decided to stop the configuring. If somebody came along and said, well, we have 64,001, we changed the code. Okay. We do want to go after the enterprise at some point, but it was not necessarily the focus for today. And the reason is we're looking for a more near-term revenue stream. It's not that Wise Manager is a better thing for a smaller account. But I'm looking to create a channel of consultants. Most of those people call on small and medium-sized businesses, so that's where our focus is. If you're going to sell to the enterprise, they have an investment to protect. Have an investment in equipment, in software, in skills. They have an infrastructure to protect, but they have problems. And as I said, I work for IBM, and IBM outsourced their support to task force. So just because they're an enterprise does not mean that outsourcing is inconsistent with their model. But it means that you have to go in and listen a lot more, be more patient, and I've been talking about a service, but what do you do if a customer wants to actually buy the stuff? Well, I would sell it. And I would not hold on to a service. No, don't give me that money. I want to use my services contract. One of the first companies that contacted us was an enterprise account. And unfortunately, because of some account control issues, we never really got a chance to work with them. But they see tremendous value in the managed client, because one of the big issues in the enterprise account is software deployment. And if you've been in there and looked at the exhibit area and watched him, if you have a folder that has the user department, it doesn't make any difference where those users are located on the network, when they come to work, or anything. If you want to distribute a fix or new applications to them, you drag that icon over to the side of the menu and you drop down the folder. And if they're logged on, they see the icon right away. If they're not logged on, the next time they log on, the application is there. If you don't think that has value to the enterprise, if you don't think that they will say, gee, that's something we could use, then I would be amazed. But the sell is different. There's absolutely no question. To the enterprise, you sell on their terms. We're talking to two consultants up in Minneapolis that have an enterprise level, I guess it's a medical equipment company, is very interested in implementing. By the way, anybody see Workspace on Demand? That's over, Workspace on Demand is a big IBM implementation of the managed client. Over here we have managed clients with Wise Manager, Wise Server, Wise Client. What's the difference? Not a whole lot. Workspace on Demand is, in fact, an OS2 client. It's a subset of Merlin. We use the entire Merlin client. But essentially what I'm saying is you would have two products that are pretty much cousins. Here I am talking to you about small and medium-sized business. Where is Workspace on Demand marketed? enterprise accounts only. Why? Because of who's marketing it. I mean, who do they call on? But is it the same product? Yes. Is it the same solution? Yes. Is ours a little better? In some ways. I mean, they have some features that I would like to have, and we will have perhaps over time. But for example, have you ever seen Workspace on Demand with multimedia? Voice that. Well, you see that on the managed client, but you won't see it on Workspace on Demand because they use a subset of the OS2 client. And they in a transaction-based workstation, you need multimedia. In IBM's opinion, no. The other thing about Workspace on Demand is essentially viewed as a service offering. By that I mean, not only do they sell it, but they're the ones that get to install it. Okay. They see that as primarily a service opportunity in-house. They also thought that when Workspace on Demand was announced, those of us who remember that it was positioned as the migration to Java. Okay. This was the step that migrated OS2 users to Java. Well, here we are a year or two later, and the problem I have with that, and I said it to IBM at the time, and I was part of the brand team at the time, is what you have is an excellent computing business tool. It should be a destination. It is not. People don't want to migrate. They don't necessarily want to step onto a rock in the middle of a stream. You know, let them do what they want with it. I'm really impressed with what Tim has been able to do with the Vendor 100 project. If you go into the exhibit area and you look at the managed clients that he has with the Vendor 100 program, and I don't know how many icons you see on there, but 60, 80 applications. Would you like to try that on a thin client? I mean, this is truly, to my mind, our managed client, the wide managed client, is kind of like a PC who doesn't know where his hard drive is. Okay? And it's extraordinarily easy to manage. And that's the real value of it. I really did not want to get into talking about product, because that's what the exhibit area is for. What I really wanted to talk about was how do you market it and how do you sell it. So I'm trying to stay there. Unfortunately, at this point, my white paper starts talking about product. One of the things that comes up is what do you do about Linux? Okay. I think that's a very reasonable question, because I'm going to sign a contract with you for 24 months or 36 months. You told me that I don't want to buy Windows because I am now the stuckee. But I don't want to buy anything because I don't want to be the stuckee. Am I going to be stuck with whatever you give me for 24 or 36 months? Under service contract? No. We do not today, Serenity Systems, have a Linux client. We have a strategic direction to add a Linux client. As I said in other discussions, this is not a plan to move off OS2 onto Linux. It's because we look at Linux and say, well, here is a business solution waiting to happen. But in my mind, Linux was not designed to be a general business desktop operating system. It lacks the fit and finish that OS2 already delivers. My reaction is, once you have these images on the server, does the server much care which one that it pushes down to the user? I mean, if you're really talking about a business solution, then you're going to be platform agnostic. You can start with an OS2 client and down the road move your users over to a Linux client. And what is the actual migration going to be like? Well, for them, it's going to be the difference between rebooting on Tuesday and rebooting on Wednesday. The whole managed client environment is all about being able to deploy software, and that includes operating systems and entire desktops. Yesterday, Kim had Peter Coffey go in and do his one-button install. Press that remote control, and that sets in motion all the activities that are required to build a network client, push down an operating system and a desktop. So Migrating to Linux is a reasonable thing to do. If it makes your users feel more comfortable, then you can tell them that's an option. You know, we'll look at that. When we've decided that this meets your business objectives, we can do that. After all, this is a services contract. And how much is it going to cost you to buy all those Linux licenses to put into that configuration? Well, if you have to buy a new book, $39. That's pretty much the extent of it. What about Microsoft Office? I've already pretty much talked about that. How many of you seen all the press on Star Office lately? InfoWorld, PC Week. Does it tell you that it's as good as Microsoft Office?
Mostly they say they don't know anything about it.
You're going to see reports? I did not see Maine. I'm always nervous when I hear Steve Maine or an article. This is not a happy man. All right. And let's count all the positive things Steve Mann's have ever written in a trade journal. But I have seen PC Week. I have seen reviews in Information Week and InfoWorld, and essentially they say, "Gee, Star Office is a very worthwhile product." It is not Microsoft Office. Maybe it falls a little short of Microsoft Office in some areas. But I also like what Nick Petrilli said about Microsoft Office. It's sort of like giving an office worker the desk the size of Cleveland. Who needs all the functionality that is in Office 2000? Is Star Office adequate? Can you make a living on Star Office? I think so. I mean, I know that you're not going to close it every time. It's not a perfect world. But it is a marketing, it is an effective marketing response to Microsoft Office. And for that matter, so is Smart Suite. Could you do this on NT? Yes. Yes. Open up that wallet. Let's talk about doing this on NT. Serenity Systems is an IBM software OEM. We can sell workspace on demand with the Win32 client support. We will make more money off that. You will make more money off that. I just don't like it. I mean, I don't like it essentially, and again, we'll go back to your point about the application to drive the solution. If you have an application that requires a Win32 client, give them a work on a Win32 client. It's the right thing to do. But there's an issue of price performance attached to it, and it's just that simple. With Workspace on Demand for Win32 clients, you start with an empty workstation, and you add on to that a Workspace on Demand client, and you add to that Workspace on Demand on the server, and a Workspace on Demand manager, and when you're all done, you have an empty client. Gee, isn't that where I started? Well, as a matter of fact, it is. Now, by the way, does Warp Server support NT clients and servers very well? Well, yeah. You know, so in my opinion, the approach is if they have an application that drives a Windows 32 or a WinNT client, let them use that. Look for the managed client opportunity at other workstations and support that one as a fact client on the same server that's supporting the managed clients. Okay? That is actually everything that I had in very quick in my sum. Of course, in the white paper, and if you want access to the white paper, all you need to do is send me an email. I will create a logon and a password for you. I will send it back to you in email. The thing that's significantly different about the white paper is it's filled with links to source materials. So where it talks about a review of Star Office, there's a link to that review of Star Office. Where it talks about total cost of ownership or Windows 2000, those are actually anchors that will take you to those articles. Okay? This document should be on the Warpstock CD because I gave them a couple of these documents on the schedule to be put onto the CD. Those links ought to work off the CD if you open it with your browser because they're HTML documents. Okay? That's it, I'm ready to sign you guys up. My email address is B as in Bob, STJOHN as in St. John, DSTJOHN at serenity-systems.com, which is, if you guys haven't seen our URL all over Warpstock yet, I don't know where. You can also just say sales at serenitysystems.com or info at serenitysystems.com. What you shouldn't do is say tech at serenitysystems.com. Okay, so I don't particularly like PCs personally, but I think it's a perfectly honorable way to make a living. Is that it? Really? You guys are very polite.
That was just frozen into the emotion.
Well, it did say Eskimos, right?
True.
Yes.
Small technical issues.
Yes. Our friend from the Netherlands.
Well, I got two questions. One is the server part meant to be also as a print server?
I'm sorry?
Print server, but to be on the same physical machine as the...
Okay. Essentially, what you're saying, what you have, and maybe
on the workstation is able.
yeah, you don't get printer sharing like you get on Pure Services Network because you have a network client. A Ripple client cannot do the kind of printer sharing that a Pure network client can do. Okay, and that is really something to talk to Kim or Glenn about. But basically, you got to deal with a network printer that is not a function of anything other than the way OS2 handles server-booted clients on Warp server.
Second one is, I have this workstation, I buy it and it has 4 gig drive in it. Isn't it useful to use that as a software drive?
Is it usual to use the 4 gig drive as well?
As a software drive for it.
Okay.
Can that increase performance?
Yeah, I could. Let me go another way here. All right, you have your nice PC, and it has a nice hard drive on it. You could actually make a managed client out of it using Boot Manager. You could boot NT95, OS2, or a managed client. It's just another way to boot the PC. That's cool. And could you use a flash card or a hard drive as a cache? Yes. Why do I say a diskless client? Because it works well that way so often, but it's not the only way to implement it. In a sense, I tend to look at hard drives, and I admit that some of this is just Kim's influence on me. I tend to look at hard drives much the way I look at power windows in a car. They're wonderful when they work. They usually fail to work when it's raining. The more things that you add, the more options that you buy, the more things that you grow on. There is a value to having no moving parts in the client. But yeah, there's no reason you can't have a hard drive. There's no reason it can't be a PC. Some of the challenges, and one of the reasons that we try to control the hardware so carefully is because a remote boot, a Ripple boot of a client, how do you change from VGA to SVGA? Well, it's pretty easy to do if you have the right chipset. How do I know I have the right chipset? Well, I'm not sure I can answer that. In fact, we've done a lot of talking with Kendall from SciTech about their video drivers, and we hope that's going to open things up. But frankly, right now, you could probably take any OS2 machine if you had a supported NIC and use it as a managed client, but you're going to have potential issues like running an SVGA as opposed to VGA. But, that's a function of the support of the chipsets in there. That's one of the reasons that I like the 2800s. This is, if I'm a user, maybe I don't care too much, but as a distributor, it's nice to know that if somebody buys it in Australia or the Netherlands or Mexico, that they're using the same onboard network adapter and video chipset that the person in Minneapolis is using. Because none of us want to hear the phone call that begins like, this application was working in Houston, but for some reason it doesn't work in LA. way, and we're using the same hardware. Well, I don't know that that's true, because you built your PCs yourself from whatever components happen to be on sale at the time, you know. And as someone pointed out, I believe it was you, it may not have been, OS2 is sometimes picky about hardware. And sometimes that's the price you pay for working with something that, you know, yeah, maybe it is a little picky about hardware sometimes, I will give it that. We're finished? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're finished. Thank you very much for your time, I really appreciate it.
Sorry to do that to you, but. Yeah.